Good day, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 98. As always, we are going to start us off with a tune, which, because he made it, Chris is going to play.
All right, are you ready?
Yep.
Take up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed. Go bind your sons to exile, to serve your captives' need. To wait in heavy harness on flooded folk and wall. Your new gods, sullen peoples, have devil and have child. Take up the white man's burden, in patience to abide, to veil the threats of terror and check the show of pride. By open speech and simple, 100 times made plain, to seek another's profit and work another's gain. Take up the white man's burden, the savage wars of peace. Fill full the mouth of famine and bid the sickness cease. And when your goal is nearest, the end for others sought, what's love that heed and folly, bring all your hopes to naught. Take up the white man's burden, no tawdry rule of kings, but toil of serf and sweeper, the tale of common things. The ports ye shall not enter, the roads ye shall not tread. Go make them with your living and mark them with your dead. Take up the white man's burden and reap his old reward. The blame of those ye better, the hate of those ye guard. The cry of those ye humor are slowly towards the light. Why brought ye us from bondage, our loved Egyptian night? Take up the white man's burden, ye dare not stoop to less, nor call too loud on freedom to cloak your weariness. By all ye cry or whisper, by all ye leave or do, the silent, sullen people shall wail gods and you. Take up the white man's burden, have done with childish days, the lightly profit laurel, the easy ungrudged praise. Come down to search your manhood through all of thankless years. No age with dear bought wisdom, the judgment of your peers. Take off the white man's burden through all the thankless years.
Hey,
There you go. That was our own Chris Gard, who's on the stream, with a poem originally from Rudyard Kipling, obviously, which is being used quite a lot as a theme for this channel at the moment, because I think it's fairly appropriate.
indeed.
All right. As always, I'm going to start us off with have you got a first subject to start us off with? And do you have one, Chris?
I brought it up before, but it's rearing its ugly head again in the sphere. There's just this fucking autistic anti-natalist sort of. Well, they explicitly say that they're not anti-natalist, but all their implications are anti-natalist. Like they all believe that they are the vanguard elite, and they're not. You know, that they can't take the risk of having a family, and because you know the institution of marriage is stacked against you, and all women are thoughts and blah blah blah. So therefore, just abandon it and just take up the political cause as if they're some sort of Leninist revolutionary. And yeah, I've just been banging my head against them, saying you can't fucking think like this. You need to have families. I'm sorry, it's just retarded.
But you're a family man, aren't you, Chris?
I am, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, you know, I'm a dad. So I absolutely, I just think it's crazy that people in our sphere say you shouldn't have kids. I mean, like one of the things we absolutely have to do is have kids.
Right.
And you can only do that safely and in a good way within a family. I get people like Red Hawk, for example. I like Red Hawk. I think he has some quite good advice for young blokes. But he says he won't get married. Now, I don't necessarily, I kind of understand where he's coming from, but I don't think it's necessarily true.
Yeah, I mean, I like Red Hawk. You know, he's a friend of mine. But yeah, that it's that PUA sphere itself that like he will say, yeah, you know, like at the end of the day, I will still encourage men to find women, get married, and have kids or whatever. But that then, like, you know, adds on to that but we also need to realize that the odds are stacked against us, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, yeah, that's fair enough. But like, you might be priming them, you might be trying to prime them for that end goal of marriage and children. But if they're already struggling and, you know, a total omega male or whatever, like by the time you've told them that and then they hear, oh, but it's all stacked against you. If they're already struggling, they're going to look at the two options going, oh, I can either be a fucking revolutionary political actor that can make change and change the world, or like, you know, I could go down this other path that I'm already on, which is too hard and it hurts. And, you know, I'd rather just take the easy one and just abandon women and just be like a fucking celibate, like political actor, because like, the messaging is so mixed. You know, I know what that's like. I used to be like that when I was really a lot younger. That changed, and then I did the whole plate spinning bullshit in my early 20s. But like, I know what that's like. And if someone had told me, "Oh, it's all fucked, it's all stacked against you, don't bother," I would have taken that route. You know what I mean? So yeah. It doesn't matter that you're still, you know, trying to say, or you know, you should still have families. People are still going to listen to that last thing you said, and that's what's going to hang in their mind. And you can see it, and you can see when people are arguing about it, that they're coming from this totally antinatal perspective, and it's fucking so destructive. I hate it.
Mitch, you're a younger fella. What do you think? Hang on, maybe he's not there at the moment. Look, my view on this is that like I'm exactly the same as you, Chris. When I was a young bloke, you know, especially because like I was in the army and shit. Yeah, you did plate spinning, you did the occasional one night stand, although I never really liked one night stands all that much.
Me either. I hated it.
Yeah, well, because you know, you either like the chick or you don't. If you didn't like her, then why did you do it anyway? And if you did like her, one night stand ain't enough. So you know, neither thing's going to work. But I do get where people like Red Hawk is coming from, and I think he does give young men some good advice. But like he will say himself, you cannot expect to get a chick who's going to be this absolutely traditional blonde-haired chick in the
trad virgin
in the cornfields who's a trad virgin. what you've got to do is you've got to get a reasonable girl and convert her to your way of thinking, which you can do if you're a good bloke.
Yep. Women follow men's lead, and that's just as simple as that. I mean, Red Hawk says that as well. He'll always say,
he does.
Like any woman's like political or philosophical or anything decisions are always, you know, of like being led by whatever man she's associated with, either her like father, brothers, or her husband, boyfriend, whatever. Like they're natural followers. So And like that aversion, they call it like turning a hoe into a housewife. It's like, oh, you can't turn a hoe into a housewife, and it's just like, well, actually, yes, you can. You don't have to find
if she's not too much of a hoe, yeah.
Exactly. And believe it or not, you can even do the same to like lefty ideologue girls. Like if you're a strong enough sort of force in their life, they'll just completely change for you.
Absolutely true. Mitch, you're back now, I see. Oh, sorry, I missed your messages in private chat. What's your view on this stuff as a young bloke?
I can agree on the latter point, Chris, because I'm thinking you get these, like, for example, in Norway, these Viking societies where all the women in it are completely paused. Like, they'll just think that Ngubu from Burkina Faso can LARP as I beard Sigurdsson or whatever. I mean, but then let's face it, let's say for argument's sake, one of those girls dated a guy like Chris, after a time, they just go completely daughter of Albion mode or whatever.
True facts.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that at all, actually. I just think I think people get their messages mixed up. Like, because Red Hawk himself is a bit too, at this stage, and he might change. He's quite a young bloke.
He's very young, yeah. He will change.
Yeah, he is. He's only in his early 20s. He will. I think he might well change as he gets a bit older, or he meets the right chick. Because he is very nervous of that, and I understand this. Like, divorce rape and all this stuff is absolutely true. It does happen to blokes all the bloody time, and everything in the family court legal system. If you're a married bloke and your wife divorces you, is against you. You must understand that, because you're not going into it in a realistic manner if you don't. But you can meet a reasonable girl, and you can change it more to your way of thinking, because as Chris rightly says, women tend to follow their blokes. You will notice, even in the recent American midterm elections, single women overwhelmingly voted for the Democrats. Single white women overwhelmingly voted for the Democrats. That was not true of married white women. Married white women mostly followed their blokes and voted for the Republicans.
It's because they need to follow the great patriarch of the Democrat Party. Ashton Duke says, unless you're a filthy rich Chad, you have to make compromises with women you date. It's like, I completely agree with that. That's fine. What I'm saying is that you don't have to be one or the other. Like, you're not going to be just dominating her. Like no. I don't dominate my wife. Like, I don't tell her what to do and all that sort of shit. But like, you as a general sort of sense of how the relationship dynamic works, it's usually always a woman will just sort of follow the man's lead, but not if he's weak and pathetic, obviously.
Absolutely right. She's got to admire you. She's got to admire you and look up to you. If she admires you and looks up to you, which is a natural way for your woman to be with a bloke, she will then follow you. It's not domination; it's leading. It's a bit like in an ideal world, a military officer doesn't dominate his men; he leads them. And it's a bit like that on a smaller scale, in a different way. I think that's where the confusion lies. But I mean, I see this stuff all the time. I remember when the Afghanistan thing went off and Biden did that chaotic evacuation, and everyone was saying, "Oh, the Taliban are great and they're our mates." No, they're fucking not. I'm sorry, they're not. They're not our mates as Western white men. They're just not.
With the exception of Nick. Oh, sorry.
No, carry on, Mitch. Carry on.
I was just going to say, with the exception of Nick Fuentes, who actually said, because I mean, it's only Nick Fuentes I know, just he was saying that sort of crap about the Taliban.
Did he say the Taliban were our mates?
Yeah, he pretty much said that. He pretty much said that our allies against the guy. Put it that way.
The Taliban that have these little boys of like 12 who they bugger for like years. Yeah, all right then. But then I know that this will really anger Jobu in the chat, but because he likes Nick Fuentes. But I got my doubts about Nick Fuentes in some respects. But it's just
Jobu says there's a Georgia Maloney out there for all of us.
Yeah. I think Georgia Maloney's pretty cute, and when she was younger, she was very, very cute. I mean, I still think she's not bad.
I reckon she looks insane, personally, but
yeah, I'd probably tap her. Yeah, I've got nothing against her at all. And I love that thing that Jobu put up in the Discord where she was like slanging off the French. That was excellent. But then I'm an Englishman and I'm not all that fond of the French. So,
yeah. I'm no friend of the French, let me tell you.
So yeah, look, I mean the other thing you get is people on the right saying, "Oh, you really should support abortion because most of the people getting aborted are not white." I'm not sure how true that is, to be honest. I'm sure it's true in some areas and in some places, but on the whole, I'm pretty anti-abortion. Look, because to be real, this is Adam and my mate. Adam can't make this stream, by the way, because he's only just got home and he's knackered, but from work, I mean. And so, yeah, I kind of agree with that being an Englishman. But yeah, it's like I think a realistic position for the right should be that there shouldn't be abortions after 12 weeks. I mean, I'm basically anti-abortion, but like a realistic position should be 12 weeks, unless there's some really good medical reason. So,
which is about 0.5 and or less % of all abortions anyway.
A tiny number. It's mostly women who didn't use any sort of contraception. I mean, it's not like women don't have contraception, blokes don't have contraception, and all this stuff is available. It's not like, if you have sex, you're absolutely going to have a baby. So the whole argument about, abortion and abortion up until like when the kid's born, which apparently Victoria now has in Australia, to me, that's just disgusting. It's just disgusting.
Was it Matt Walsh or someone like that who was saying that, like with teenage pregnancies and whatever, that they should just force the teenagers to get married? Literally just force them.
It's kind of what used to happen in the West. If back in the day in like say 1890 in Australia or Britain or Canada or any Western nation, probably America too, I think. In fact, certainly America too. If you were messing around with a chick and she got pregnant, you ended up marrying her. That was the deal. Everyone knew it.
Return to shotgun marriages, indeed. And that too, the late-term abortion is horrible. Someone says there. True. In fact, all abortions are. They're all unpleasant. Many of them are extremely fucking traumatic, psychologically damaging, and people just seem to think that it's just like it's. They don't say that it is a form of contraception. Like they'll argue against you, but the fact that they're using it in lieu of contraception, they're so flippant about it, and they're fighting for it as if it's like the right to leave your house or brush your teeth or something. It's like, no, this is a fucking horrible, horrible procedure, and we should be avoiding it at all costs.
I'll let you in a secret, Chris. So, like, I've two women in my life, and like, I'm old, all right? I'm 57, so I'm old. I'm not a 25-year-old bloke, but I'm 57, and two women in my life have had abortions I didn't want them to have. And because I was a bloke, I had no influence on that decision. No legal influence whatsoever. I just not allowed. Nothing. You're the dad, don't mean a thing, mate.
Yeah.
She wants an abortion, she gets an abortion. I mean, I left both of them, of course.
Yeah.
But,
it's just evil.
That's all you can do as a bloke is you can only leave them.
Yep.
And how is that fair? I mean, because like a child is 50% his mother and 50% his father. That's the point.
I would have been out there as well, mate. I would have been out the door. See you later.
Yeah, that's what I did. But that's all I could do. And it's incredibly frustrating. But but it's where we are in the world today, which is like, you know, pretty fucking evil, to be honest with you. Did you was that all you had to say on that one, Chris, or was there anything else?
Yeah, pretty much just the same sort of sentiment about the difference between the peasants and the vanguard. It's no use having peasants pretending that they're all vanguard elite. Otherwise, no one has kids and no one builds civilization. They just run around on Twitter throwing memes at each other, not having children.
Yeah, I'm not even sure what a vanguard elite is, to be honest with you. I mean, I get it from Jonathan Bowden. I understand what he was talking about, which was a political elite.
The best way that I sort of conceptualize it is just the sort of the feudal lord kind of thing, who is basically, you know, he sees over his section. The peasants can revolt under his leadership, but the peasants aren't the elite. He is. The lord's the elite.
Yeah,
and he'll have a coalition of sort of other disgruntled lords and whatever that want to fucking make some change. And the peasants will be behind them as soldiers, but they're not warriors. They're just, you know, they're just family men, and they work and they build stuff. So
yeah, I know. I think there's a lot of truth in that. I mean, and also, you know, we often on the right, we talk about like good kings and people in that kind of role. And the thing about good kings is that their major thing was what's good for my kingdom and what's good for my people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, which is complete opposite of what the so-called elites we have today actually do.
Yeah, exactly. Well, as you say, the king has an investment in his realm to thrive, and there's no point oppressing the shit out of all your subjects, because you're going to get nothing out of that. You're just going to get rebellion constantly and revolt. Whereas, you know, I mean, this is all just Hans Hermann Hoppe sort of stuff, like the difference between the democratic steward who has zero investment in the actual health of the nation, and they just circulate and cycle through. They operate in 4-year cycles, and that's it. Whereas the king is like, you know, he's going to be technically ruling that kingdom until he dies. And then after that, his child will inherit it. So it's still that bloodline. That's the full lifetime investment to make it a good kingdom that thrives. So
yeah, I mean, look, I'll give you a lower level example of that. In the 18th and 19th century, what are you laughing at, mate?
Dad guard elite.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, to be honest, that's not that's the Franklin's thing, yeah, and it's really true, because that's every single one of those people back in the day who were the elites would have been fathers. Every single one of them, no matter whether they were right at the top of the aristocracy or they were basic peasants, they would have all been fathers.
Mm-hmm.
That's an absolute truth from the Franklin, who is one of my favorite YouTubers, by the way. Go and subscribe to his channel. And by the way, the Franklin, if you want to join this channel, let me know. Want to join this stream, let me know, and I'll send you a link. But anyway, I'll give you a much lower level of this. In the 18th and 19th century, the very best Royal Navy officers, the very best either admirals or ship's captains, they had what were called followers. And these people would vary. Some of them would be officers, a lot of them would be NCOs, and a few of them would be very highly skilled seamen, very highly skilled sailors. And they would follow these dudes from one ship to another. And what the captain's job was, because they were his followers, he would promote the best of them. Yeah, so that some of the NCOs would become officers, they'd become midshipmen, and they get commissioned and this kind of stuff. And the other guys who were doing different sorts of jobs, they would be given the same job in another ship if they were really good at it. And really good frigate captains and people like Nelson and what have you, these guys had lots of followers. So you would have, this is why the whole the whole press gang stuff is like bollocks, really. The best role Navy captains didn't need press gang's because they would put up like billboards in places, and all of the word of mouth and the sailors would turn around and say, "This bloke is a really good captain, and on top of that, we're going to earn loads of prize money by capturing enemy ships." And so we'll like triple or quadruple our wages, which was quite easy to do in the late 18th and early 19th century in the Napoleonic Wars. And so these guys would have that. That is the much more natural system.
Yep.
Lumbar is saying, "Oh, the Franklin, you're the Franklin." Yes, surprisingly enough, the Franklin is the Franklin. Excellent channel. I started following the Franklin, I don't know, 6 years ago or something, when he was still called, what was it? Can't remember now. What was your channel called 6 years ago, the Franklin? You can tell me in the chat if you like. Mitch, opinions on this stuff?
The whole like Vanguardism in terms of like, because it's mainly like you take, I don't know. I can remember when some people used to have a bollock at James Allsop because it turned out that when he had his kid, he and the girl that had the kid, they weren't married at the time, but they conceived the kid, but they had a shotgun wedding, and some people had a bollock at him for that. But then, I mean, at the end of it, but then, so it's like even when you get some people in the right who do the whole shotgun wedding, it's like you'll get some of these people who Chris will go on a bit talks about. They'll even like bollock those types. So it's like, well, some people you'll just, I don't know. I feel like they give up too easily. That's the main problem.
Yep, and they're paying attention to too many people like BAP. It's like, are we taking our marriage advice from a homosexual? Are we? Okay.
Yeah. No. If BAP's not gay, I'm just amazed. Honestly, I really like. Have you seen some of the pictures he posts?
Well, if he's not gay, he's the most impressively crypto heterosexual I've ever encountered.
Don't try and get Family Guys. Just simply after photos of like Benjamin Netanyahu from the 70s or whatever.
Oh man, I don't know. You know what? I haven't. I look. If someone's really ugly, I could probably tell. I guess. But like my idea of what a cute bloke is like nothing really. I don't have any clue. It's like blokes are just blokes, really.
Yeah, I've also heard about BAP is actually Romanian, which I'm thinking, okay, I'll just go ask, what's he bothering doing on the internet? Because Romania is already enough of a profession. What does he need the internet for?
I thought he was Russian.
No.
You know this, Mitch, but I thought he was Russian originally.
No, his name is something like Kostin Alamaru or something.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, when I heard his accent for the first time, I knew it was Eastern European, but I couldn't pinpoint it. And then I find out his name.
It is extremely exaggerated, his voice. He does it deliberately.
Ben Gall in the chat is saying his book's quite
good. I don't want to disparage him too much. Like, he's obviously like a fucking really smart guy, like, and he knows his stuff. But on this topic, I just hate it. It makes me so angry.
I definitely think he's like pretty gay.
As you said, you can appreciate male beauty, and male beauty when you see it. Like, you just like, oh fuck, that guy's genetically extremely gifted, good on him. But like, to spend all day posting pictures of nude Greek oily statues and wrestlers, and it's like, this is in a different territory now.
No, that's gay, man. Honestly, it's just gay. I mean, look, if it ain't got tits, I ain't posting it online as a picture. I'm just not,
Anyway.
But I am like aggressively heterosexual, but like I think that's what we seem to have lost these days a bit. And I thought, don't get me wrong, I was in the army. I've seen so many fucking naked blokes, you got no idea. But like, no thank you. I just don't like naked blokes.
Homo.
No, I just don't like it. I'm sorry.
Do we even have to ask what you lot did in the showers?
Well, yeah. I mean, like,
Platonic cuddling.
no, we didn't do that. Strange to say. And anyone who did would have got bullied, surprisingly, and I think they should have, because if you're going to send your 18-year-old in to join the military, and you're a mum or a dad, you would kind of not want him to be exposed to that kind of stuff, would you? And in the old days, the military used to protect people against that kind of stuff, and they don't anymore.
Franklin says, given your age, it's no exaggeration to say that your testosterone levels would still be 12 out of Zoomers today. I can believe that.
I reckon they're probably higher, Franklin, to be honest with you. But that's just what I see, man. Honestly, I like some of the things people say that they just amaze me. To be honest with you, they do. They just amaze me. I don't know. Anyway, we've probably done enough on this. Mitch, did you have a first subject you wanted to bring up?
Well, we nearly went through nuclear Armageddon this week, so I think.
Yep, we did.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we should count ourselves lucky that, in a way, but our media, as detestable as they are, don't want to get nuked the same as us or the Russians. So there is that. But look, yeah, and then you've got the Ukrainians who claim that a Russian missile hit a Polish village. Turns out later to be an S-300, which the Russians don't use anymore. But however, you still get
and it's an air defense missile. It's not like a missile you use to attack the ground. It's a missile that you use against aircraft and other missiles.
Yeah, that's also notable because they're meant to have self-destruct mechanisms. So the fact they didn't self-destruct before reaching the village is either, but the Ukrainian missiles have either gone down in quality over the years, same as all the Russian stuff, or they purposely disabled it because if you're conspiratorially minded, you could say that the Ukrainians deliberately did this. Because let's face it, the Polish won't say anything because, put it this way, I was going to say something about Polish sympathy for the Ukrainians, but I don't want to get done by YouTube. But yeah.
Oh, look, mate, the Poles and the Baltic states all immediately came out and said, oh, Russia's attacked us because they want to start World War III. Why they think that's going to benefit them, because if World War III starts, like, I don't know, at least 90% of us are going to die in the whole world. Why they think that's a good thing, I have got no clue whatsoever, but fortunately, even the Americans turned around and said, nah, this was not a Russian missile.
I mean, when you come to Estonia, I'm pretty sure it's like their president or what was it, the prime minister? Yeah.
Kaya.
Like, I think it's an Estonian president or something whose son is a transgender or something like that, or dresses up like a woman.
Yep.
So if Russia nukes Estonia, I'm not going to miss Estonia for that one.
What, Estonia has the president dresses up like a woman?
No.
The
son.
The son of the president of Estonia. So he's a base bloke, man. If his son turned out that way, absolutely wonderful. Yeah, but of course, according to the West, that's entirely acceptable these days.
Yeah, I mean that's one thing is Poland is going away, but it seems like with Estonia and with what's called a butthurt belt, as it's called, because it's all full of countries that hate Russia so much that they're willing to become puppets of America.
It's sorry to interrupt. It's the Prime Minister, by the way, Kaya Kallas, and it's a woman, her son.
Is she single, Chris?
No, I think Kaya was the one that was shrieking about nuclear war.
Oh, okay.
Going to war with Russia.
Yeah, I just know that all of the Baltics and Poland were like desperate to start World War III and everyone to exchange nuclear weapons because that's what will happen if NATO fights Russia.
Yeah, you got the case of the Baltic states who, I mean, let's face it, even in NATO war plans, they predict that within a week the Baltic states would be lost to the Russians because.
Absolutely, yeah.
So what? You got
and about 2 or 3 days later, at most, there'd be nuclear weapons exchanged between everybody, and we'd all die. Basically, most of us would die. It's insane. It's insanity. You cannot fight a country like Russia with a big nuclear arsenal. You just can't fight them. I'm sorry, you can't. Because any side that's going to win, and it ain't going to be NATO because we don't have enough soldiers anyway, the other nation is going to nuke the fuck out of you. Excuse my language. That's what they're going to do.
Yeah, I mean, another thing about Ukraine is that in Odessa, because they've got power shortages, now you've seen like people just like protest and like really throw stuff at the police station and whatnot because they're blaming the Ukrainian state for the power outages because it's not just like the Russian missile strikes that are doing havoc, it's also the fact that Odessa, because the thing about Odessa is in 2014 there was a fire there that killed a lot of pro-Russians, so it's kind of like a bit dodgy for the Ukrainian side because it's like a lot of the population there support Russia, but then it's also but then you get other parts of Odessa that support the Ukrainians, so it's kind of mix and mix. But yeah, you get power from Odessa being diverted towards other cities like Kherson and other areas like that. And of course, the people in Odessa are getting like really angry about it. So
look, Odessa, as we were talking about in the Discord before the stream, Mitch, Odessa is basically a Russian city, and it's where in 2014. When there were big protests in Odessa that they wanted to go back to Russia, the Ukrainian military rolled into that place and they burnt to death. They literally burnt to death a load of Russian civilians.
Yeah, it's like, I don't think it was military, but yeah, it's in like Ukrainian pro-Bandera types, you know, like the types that you get in Azov these days. So. Yeah. So the Russian side have plenty of grudges in that area, and yeah, a lot of the population there.
It's a Russian-speaking city, isn't it?
Yeah, it's either Russian-speaking or they'll speak what's called Syrzhyk, which is basically a dialect that's half Ukrainian, half Russian. So it'd be more Russian, put that way. Like back in when you look about elections, we're mainly voting like pro-Russian parties. Until very recently.
I tell you what, I don't pretend to understand everything that's happening because we're getting propaganda from both sides, although 95% more from the West and the Western MSM that can't even lie straight in bed. But what I'm getting from all of this stuff is that basically the places Russia is capturing are pro-Russian and are full of Russians. So it's a bit like when the USA backed Texas against Mexico in the 1840s, when most of the Texans were Americans, really, and didn't like the Mexicans. And that was all right back then. And pretty much what the Russians are doing today is very much like that. It's Russia taking back parts of Russia full of bloody Russians who want to be Russian. And I don't understand why the West is so anti that. Well, I mean, I do understand why they are, but it's not a good reason.
Yeah, in the case of when you come, because he has the name Novorossiya, because yeah, it used to be like pretty much like a Wild West at one time, but then when the Industrial Revolution came, it was settled on by like Russian-speaking people, and then all the industry, and then I think it was Lenin who gave all those lands over to Ukraine because the Soviets wanted to give some of these like Russian-speaking lands over to Ukraine because to bind Ukraine further into the Russian sphere, and it wasn't much of a problem till the fall of the Soviet Union when Ukraine and Russia go their separate ways. And of course, you got Ukraine, who Western Ukraine speaks a very different language from Russian. Like Russians can't really understand Ukrainian spoken in the West, but they can understand the Ukrainian people in, say, cities like Kharkov or Odessa or those oblasts that Russia's annexed. So it's kind of like it's a really complicated ethnic clusterfuck, to put it that way. It's like you take Crimea, for example. I mean, it's very mixed there because you got Crimean Tatars, you've got Bulgarians, you've got Russians, you've got some Greeks from like because you get cities like Mariupol and
that was largely Greek, but I mean that goes back to almost Catherine the Great, doesn't it?
Yeah, because Catherine the Great was like a massive Grecophile, but like and also because when the Ottoman Empire still ruled over Greece, a lot of Greeks moved over into Russia.
Lot safer for the Greeks in those days, especially if they're Orthodox. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so the Greeks were allowed to set up their own communities because they believed in the same Orthodox faith as the Russians. So that's why you'll see a lot of place names around that region with Pole, like Shilpopolis, like city. So
yeah, I watched. You know Patrick Lancaster, Mitch. The American Navy dude who is a reporter now on the Russian side of things. He's
always out of breath in his videos.
Yeah, he was in the Navy, mate. The Navy don't learn to run, but yeah, he was a U.S. Navy. He's a U.S. Navy veteran, but he's married to a local Russian girl. And he even interviewed months ago now, like little old Greek ladies who still spoke Greek in Mariupol and around that place. Absolutely, totally pro-Russian.
I remember his video when he was going around prior to their referendum that they had just recently to, bring those regions back into Russia. And it's like nearly every single person he encountered was an ethnic Russian. And they're just fucking everywhere. And all of them were basically just like, yeah, this is stupid. We just need to be back part of Russia again. And the people that argue against it say, well, actually, those Russians are only there because they were deliberately, they displaced all the Ukrainians that were originally there and they filled up as Russians. And I'm like, even if that's true, the fact of the matter is that happened, 70, 80 years ago. It's already happened. They're already there. Like, what now? What, you're just going to wish that they weren't there and that they were actually Ukrainians and just pretend that it's still Ukraine? It's like, this is like an ethnically Russian area now, so just bring it back into the fold. Fuck's sake.
Yeah. And the Ukrainians have been shelling these people, like in their cities, shelling civilian areas since 2014, and no one gave a shit.
Even before that, these regions were still in some semblance of conflict and war with each other. A lot less dramatic than this, of course, but this isn't some Russia invading Crimea sort of triggered thing. Like, this has been happening.
The Crimea was always totally Russian anyway. It has been since 18.
Yeah, we should probably stop calling it invading Crimea. It's probably a bit stupid.
Yeah, anyway. The Crimea was always mostly Russian. I mean, it's where the main Russian naval base is in the Black Sea. And if that was true in 1853, even, so the idea that is still Ukrainian is like insane. The only people who gave Crimea, the person who gave Crimea to the Ukraine was Khrushchev, for God's sake, in the 1950s. It's absolute nonsense, really. But that was when Khrushchev had no idea that the Soviet Union would ever break up.
Mm.
Yeah, in the case of Ukrainian language, I mean, it's only in the last because you got to think Russian people that moved into areas like Donetsk and Luhansk, they've been there for because you get the Visegrad types who say, oh, well, they've only been there for the past 50 years. No, they've been around for 200 years. Mm-hmm. Because Catherine the Great, she was around in the 1700s. Yeah. So she settled that area with Russians. and it's been Russian ever since like 1780, for sake of argument.
Mitch,
Right.
Mitch, you're a language guru. You speak what, 7 languages or something like that?
Well, I wouldn't say speaking fluently, but I can. Let's say I were to go to any of those 7, like those areas where those 7 languages are spoken, I can get by easily enough.
Yeah, like he's modest. He actually does speak about 7 languages. But Ukrainian, when did Ukrainian become a language? I mean, not that long ago, really.
I mean, their version of Shakespeare was alive in like 1880, so it's not even 200 years old. I'll put it that way. Like Russian and Ukrainian. Ukrainian started to divert because while Russia was under the Mongol invasion, Ukraine and Belarus were under the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, so they're influenced by Polish. But it's only in the last like 200 years that really the differences between Russian and Ukrainian have become like really divergent. Like you take, I don't know, the Cossacks in 1600, who spoke what like the ancestor language of Ukrainian. It would be back when it would be mutually intelligible to the Russians.
So is Ukrainian like kind of a cross between Polish and Ukrainian, Polish and Russian?
Yeah, I would say like if I can like when I listen to like Ukrainian, it's like some words sound like Polish and other words sound like Russian, so it's kind of like a mix. Like,
Fair enough, mate.
Yeah, it's like there's some words I can understand and other words I can't easily understand till I look into like a Polish as opposed to the Russian language. But like, yeah, it's really weird. Like, but then the further east you go, the more Ukrainian resembles Russian, not just in like terms of how they say the words, but in terms of what words they use. Because
it's similar in overlap too. The difference between Finnish and Estonian, they can basically understand each other. They're very similar.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's Russian and Ukrainian. I mean, until 200 years ago, were pretty much the same as English and Scots. So so
you mean English and Lowland Scots, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all Scots, not be Scots Gaelic, like Scots as in.
Yeah. Which I can still understand. Like some of my dad's best mates were Glaswegians, and I know Englishmen who can't understand Glaswegians, but I can understand them perfectly because when I was a kid, many of my dad's best mates were Glaswegians. So, and it's perfectly understandable if you've heard it from a long time. But yeah, man.
Glasgow.
Glasgow's a good city, mate. Honestly, I used to like Glasgow in the 1980s. That was such a nice town. And I was there as a Sassenach, and I never had the slightest problem in the whole place. But I am 6'2" and 200 pounds. But yeah, Glasgow was a lovely place back in the day. I'm not sure how much it is now, to be honest.
Is it a bit stabby now? A little bit knifey.
It would be a bit more stabby because of the wee evil dwarf woman who runs Scotland these days. But yeah, it would be a bit more stabby. But back in the day, Glasgow was a great place. I mean, all right, if you were like really nasty to someone, you were going to get a Glasgow kiss, which is get your nose broken by a headbutt. But you had to be a pretty nasty person to get that happen. And I see George in the chat, who is a good Scotsman. So I will put his saying up on here. Hang on, it's not stayed up on here. I don't know why. But anyway, we'll go again.
Just to correct the record, can you see what I've just sent in the presentation thing? Just click add.
Hang on, where are we? Is this called Chris?
Yep.
Yeah,
so
okay.
a bit of fact checking. So the person on the right is the notorious.
God.
Apparently, that is not actually the son, and the middle is the president. Her name's Mira something. I can't remember. She's no longer the president. and that's apparently not her son. So it was all fake news. We were spreading fake news. I'm sorry.
Are you taking the piss and that's actually true, Chris?
No, that's not true. It was fake news. I'm sorry.
Oh,
But,
okay.
But that got debunked after everyone was going on about it, and then we sort of all forgot about it. But apparently, it's not true.
Oh, all right.
We are truth seekers in this.
But I mean, it easily could be true. Let's be fair. Where we are now. George, who I like, says 99 Duke. Don't confuse old Scots with Glaswegian slang. They're a bit different because Glaswegian gets a bit of Gaelic additions you don't see in the Doric Scots. Yeah, I'm sure that's true, George.
Be right back.
But you know, if you learn, if you hear it when you're growing up, because your dad's mates speak it, you kind of get it. Like one of my dad's best mates was an ex-Gordon Highlander, and he knew just about everything you could know about Napoleon Bonaparte and the Scottish Highland regiments in the Napoleonic Wars. Great bloke, man. And that's how I learned to speak Lowland Scottish, if you like. But my dad had mates from Newcastle, and I learned Geordie exactly the same way. And funnily enough, my dad's favourite people, and still some of my favourite people, are Glaswegian Scots and Geordies. They're generally really good people, and they're not at all woke or left-wing or in favour of sexual deviancy, shall we say. You know, they're not. The Franklin's going on about Gerald Butler, who I believe is the bloke who played
Leonidas in 300.
Yeah, Leonidas in 300. And that was I mean, it wasn't an accurate movie, but it was a pretty good movie that I don't dislike at all. So, you know, there we go. All right, next subject. The Conservatives in UK and their autumn budget statement, which is going to make every single person in the UK, ordinary people, not rich people, ordinary people, vastly poorer. And this is from the Conservative Party. But of course, when we look at the Conservative Party in the UK today, what we have to remember is the leader of the Conservative Party, who is the Indian banker, Rishi Sunak. A, he's not British, and B, no one elected him. Okay, George wants to come on, and I'm going to let George come on because George is a good young man. So I will send you a link in Discord, George. Wait 1 second. Carry on talking, gents, while I do this.
I'm just reading up on this autumn budget because I haven't been following this at all.
Well, I don't blame you, mate. It's like Australia's got its own problems, but they're not those ones.
Yeah, I got too many things to worry about as it is.
Yeah.
So what's the basic overall theme of this budget?
To make everyone vastly poorer than they have ever been since World War II. That's the basic theme of it.
So, Redwood said Hunt should have considered popular spending cuts such as axing the 11 billion Bank of England to deal with the bond market turmoil and ending the hotel bills for illegal immigrants.
Which are enormous, by the way.
Stopping the anti-driver expensive changes to main roads. Yeah, because aren't they just building road infrastructure to make it impossible for people to drive around? They want everyone to like park their cars somewhere outside, like in Oxford. Don't they just want to do that everywhere?
Well, they don't want ordinary people to drive cars at all.
Yeah.
Basically.
I mean, can they even when they're paying the equivalent of like $8 or $9 Australian dollars per fucking liter of fuel.
Oh man, listen, we're not going to have, as ordinary peasants, in after the Great Reset, we're never going to be able to have like a holiday. If you're Australian, you won't be able to go to Bali, and if you're a Brit, you won't be able to go to Malaga. You just won't. That's their deal. Good day, George. How are you going, man?
I'm happy with never going to Bali.
Good evening / good morning, all. I actually, So you guys decided to talk Turkey, so I thought I'd talk about the budget for a wee bit because it's absolute. I mean, so as a bit of forecasting to those who aren't native to the country, Jeremy Hunt, who has
a very good nickname, by the way,
who has been chancellor for a few weeks, was neither elected by the member, was neither selected by a prime minister who was elected by the members, nor by the general public, who has previously said he wanted to put people in concentration camps.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Over the China virus. Yes, he did.
All of this is official. All of this is on record. You can verify this all. Has said, "Oh, everyone's going. We're all going to be in this together, and I'm going to expect those with broader shoulders to pay for the 60 billion black hole that doesn't exist."
Is he the one that has the Chinese national as a wife?
Yes, I don't know about his wife, but I do know that he has been friends with the CCP in the past. He's like part of the Friends of China thing. He's a nasty piece of work, regardless of whether you're a lefty or a righty, but not a nice person. He has basically he went into the budget and everyone was basically going, what's he going to do? Is he going to take a hack to the NHS? Oh, maybe he'll start taxing non-domiciles, which are a form of basically when you don't tax rich people who come from somewhere else. He ended up doing neither of those. So what's happened in this budget is that basically, how do I put this? He's endorsed pensioners. So the triple lock, which is a form of pension that the UK has, which was just put in 2010, basically says that the pension will increase either A, by inflation, B, by average wages, or 2.5%. And it's whichever one of those is highest. It has to be said. So he decided to reinstate that. And so that has created 11% for pensioners. And so essentially, in a state in which we have an aging population, the pensioners who have not done their civic duty and had 2 kids to keep the population structure stable are now getting a bonanza. They are getting an 11.7% rise in their pensions. To pay for this, the first thing that's going to happen is corporation tax, which in the UK is twice as high as Ireland, is about to be is now about to become twice as high as Ireland. The income taxes are going to be reduced in threshold, which people think, oh, well, that's not increasing taxes. It is. It's just stealthily because tax brackets are a tricky thing and not a lot of people understand them. And essentially, because of the way national insurance works in the UK, there is now a 60% marginal tax on people who make more than £100,000. So which admittedly there aren't many of, because the UK is actually quite poor. In America, something like a third of the population makes more than 80 grand and 20% of the population makes more than 100 grand. In the UK, about 5% of the population make more than 100 grand. But the impact of that basically means is that being successful in any way in this country is no longer a feasible thing.
It's getting like that here too.
Yeah, there just doesn't seem to be much point in it. And the things that actually were crying out for reform, so the NHS, which is our NHS, the amount of spending that has gone into the NHS has gone up about I think it's about 5 to 10% every year. So the budget is in essence doubles about every 8 or 9 years. They're not structurally reforming that, even just because you can just throw more money at it, because even which is just not working at the moment. And in general, no tough decisions have been made, and it's more of the same Toryism. And so I thought I'd hop on to say that this wasn't a sort of a big bonanza of screw you right now. This is going to be killing you with another 1,000 cuts. So there you go.
Great.
I don't disagree with any of that, George.
Yeah.
It's like destroy the people who are the basis of your wealth.
Yeah. I mean, it's as I said, it's basically getting like that here. And now that we've just had a Labor government introduced, they fucking love their tax hikes, and they love to tax people that earn over $100,000 a year. So someone like me who, after I started my business and it started doing really well, you come at the end of the financial year and you're just looking at it, just going, what the fuck is the point of this? I could just be like on a middle wage, and I'd be like, in some cases I'd be netting more than what I'd net now, after they just fucking skin you alive on top of all the overheads and everything like that. It's just like you're just getting fleeced from every fucking angle. It's like, no wonder people are looking for dodgy accountants to hide their money. It's just like, this is fucking insane. What's the incentive?
I was going to say that it's like, so in the UK these days, so first of all, like I generally describe myself as a relatively centrist economic character. I think you should definitely be helping the people who are most unfortunate. I don't want to get run over by a car and be footed with the bill. That's just not fair. That being said, I also, I do have a lot of, I think that people should be allowed to also strive and do better for themselves and all that. Yeah. That being said,
sorry, go on.
Sure. That being said, in the UK right now, that sort of model has basically been continuing compromised, trying to help an increasing bracket of people at the bottom, and doing minimal amounts about the top. And I actually just wanted to bring up that as soon as these as these tax rises were announced, and we were told that there was this huge big gap in spending, the first thing that happens is the Prime Minister promises more money for Ukraine. I'm kind of a Philistine, I don't understand all these things, but I thought that, like, if we don't have much money at all, we shouldn't be spending it on other countries.
Yeah.
Apparently,
is not foreign aid basically just a back scratching exercise between countries anyway? It's not really. It's not really about donating or anything.
This isn't under the foreign aid budget. This is just direct verbatim payment. This is just a handout. Okay. This is just a handout to the Ukrainian government. Now, look, I think people know from this channel, when I was last on here a few months ago, I'm relatively indifferent about the invasion. I just don't think it's our place to be on one side or the other.
Absolutely correct. I totally agree with you, George. It's not our business. It's a long way off, and I don't care.
But I would hope that the government would just have some kind of principles in basically saying that, okay, look, things are really hard for us right now. Okay, so we're going to look after everyone else. But instead, that guy who had the audacity to start a successful business or whatever, he's getting more of his money squeezed so that, I don't know, so Ukraine can fire more missiles at Poland. That's
100%.
Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah, 100%, George, you are. Look, it's crazy, mate. It's just crazy. And look, Chris, I know for a fact, is a hard-working tradie. Like you, Chris, I don't think it's a secret. You work as a roofer, right? Like he's a bloke who comes home at night with 50,000 like cuts on his hands from doing roofing, and he puts roofs
True.
on. He comes home at night from putting roofs on places where when it rains there's leaks. Like he does real good for human beings.
And that's what you're saying there is part of the reason why I've been getting so angry about it lately, is because I mean, so I have no problem with taxes and especially our Medicare system. I think our Medicare system works really fucking well. We have amazing public health here. It's better in most cases. It's
better than the NHS for sure.
Much better, and of course, much better than the American healthcare system as well, obviously. But like, to the point where we would still prefer to use the public system over the private hospital system. So we don't even get private health because the Medicare system is actually really good up here where we are. And I've been to hospital 3 or 4 times in the past couple of years. And in some cases, I've, taken up resources being in that hospital, probably in the tens of thousands of dollars when I was staying there for one of them, when I was in a surgical ward. And I'm like, this is great. Like, I feel perfectly fine paying for this. This is fine. Like tax me for Medicare, but it's all these other areas that this tax money is going that is fucking frivolous and retarded. And fair enough if you're someone who works in the kind of, I don't know, IT, managerial, bureaucrat sort of civil service where you're in an office, you don't really like, you're at work, but you're probably not doing much or whatever. And you make, I don't know, 80 grand a year doing that. Fine. Okay. Yeah. Like I can understand, taxing them. Oh, okay. It sucks. But like when you're doing something like what I do, where you're literally physically destroying your body to make that money, like I'm on borrowed time. Like once I get to my 60s, I'm gonna be physically fucked. And you break your body like that, and then the government comes in and takes half, and then on top of that, you have insurances and then overheads and all that sort of stuff. And it's just like it's like they're stealing the blood out of your body.
Another day older and deeper in debt. Saying don't be calm because I can go. I owe my soul to the government store.
Chris, Tomb of Armenia says in the chat, fuck Medicare, come on, mate. He also says...
I disagree.
No, I do also absolutely to a point, because my love of my life was an Australian registered nurse who was a theatre nurse, and she could do like pretty much anything. And like if she met you and you were dying, she'd probably have a reasonable chance of saving you. She was she had a master's degree in nursing, and she was actually pretty skilled. Yeah, so I do kind of agree with that. And I think kind of Western ideas are, if you can save people, you should save people. That's all right. Where we get it wrong is we go overboard on this, and we try and save people who can't bloody well be saved no matter what you do.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, on the other hand, because particularly the UK's government's incentives are actually quite perverse, because they basically see everything as a money-saving exercise. You can get people like Wee Alfie from a few years ago, who the government basically says, "Yeah, we're going to pull the plug," and because the government has the monopoly on medical services, the parents can't seek out private treaters.
Oh, I remember that.
They have
disgusting. Yeah, I do remember
and
that.
You're not allowed to take the kid to America for a life-saving surgery. No, that would be inhumane according to the government here.
Yeah, I remember that. They killed this little. They killed this.
Yeah, they killed a wee bairn.
Yeah, a little British guy's kid, because they just said no, you can't do that.
Yep.
Totally socialist.
Yeah, well, it's the state decided that this person's life wasn't worth it, and that you're allowed to go. Speaking of which, is people the Lotus Eaters covered actually this week the Canadian healthcare thing, in which they're basically like I can't remember if it's like helps or something like that. In which basically
Canada is killing people these days on purpose.
Well, you can be an 18-year-old, fresh-eyed and white-toothed, come out of school, and you can say, I want to kill myself. You can go to the Canadian government and say, I want to kill myself, and the Canadian government won't even talk to your parents about it, won't refer to a psychologist, go, yep, great, fantastic, you're going to die.
Yeah, you're right, George. I'm sorry, this is true. Ashton Duke says in the chat, was the British kid brain dead? No, he wasn't.
I think he was in a sort of an indeterminate recovery of coma or something like that.
They weren't decide. They couldn't decide. But why is it the British government's job to say what his parents can do? Like, if his parents want to take him somewhere else, why is that anything to do with the British government? It's nothing. It's nothing to do with the British government. They should just bow out and say, I don't care.
Well, it's the problem you get when you make, like, and I don't mean to sound like an ANCAP about this, because I'm not, but it is a problem with the government controlling your healthcare.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
There is the problem of basically them going, you are no longer an economic utility, like you're a drain on the service, so bye bye.
The same British government that wants to bring in, I don't know, 600,000-700,000 third world immigrants a year, and they can all go on the National Health Service.
Yeah, but I heard they're all doctors, so you know, whatever.
Yeah, they're all brain surgeons, exactly, George. They are.
Yeah,
of course they are. Because
did you guys hear about the Albanian stockbroker?
No, go on, tell us. Please tell us.
So there's a Channel 4 report about someone. She said that she was a stockbroker and she made a bad trade deal, and people were angry at her, so she had to come over here. It was quite funny, that, but so I mean, I really hopped on to just talk about the budget, because like the budget was, you know, people.
But it's going to destroy everyone in the UK who is not like an absolute basic Pakistani.
Well, it will destroy everyone in the UK, because the way this will work, and you can hold me to this, is that the government is going to have, like, a lot of the top people are just going to start leaving the country. You know, the actual surplus taxpayers, they're just going to start leaving the country 100%. Because it's just not worth it at this point anymore. Because,
and of course, what we all need to bear in mind is, if you are an absolute top-ranked Brit, or Australian, or New Zealander, or Canadian, or American, you can go anywhere you want if you've got enough money.
Well, I was going to point out that, like, you know, a lot of people will say, well, tax rates are similar in places like Denmark or Norway. And it's like, yeah, but those places have nice public services. You know, if I get sick in Denmark, I can trust that I will be seen within 4 hours in A&E. I cannot have that guarantee in this country. I might not be seen for 24 hours. So there is, you know, there's not much incentive to stay here. So, I mean, I know you guys a few weeks ago were talking about moving country, and like, I would say that if people are, you know, if you're relatively good at learning languages, I would learn either Italian or Danish. One of those two countries is my sort of goal, because at the moment, the public services and the tax structures in this country are just disgusting. There's just absolutely no point being a striver. None whatsoever.
George, look, I know you come from a family that has a long history of service to Great Britain, and the fact that you can say that is just like, you know, it tells us all you need to know about modern Britain. Yeah,
it's really tough. So a friend of mine wants to think about going to America. You know, because there are certain states in America that, you know, they're not too bad at the moment. And I honestly, and we both had we had a reasonable talk about.
I've got to go, guys.
All right, cheerio, pal.
Go well, Chris.
So yeah, we had to have a serious discussion, and we were like, what's the point at which we say we can no longer stay in the UK? I'm not at the point yet at which I say I'm leaving the country. This is just awful, but I'm nearly there. I'm really nearly there. And I just don't, and like, it sucks because every bit of my bones and bodies are in this country.
Hold on a bit, George, if you can, mate, because things may change. Maybe especially in the next 2 winters, things may change.
I wouldn't hold your breath about it.
No, I'm not.
The reason I wouldn't hold your breath is that we have had some pretty insane things happen already, and most people are like, nah, whatever. So we found that thing out about like the vaccines earlier this year. No, earlier this month.
Yeah, no, it was all a lie.
Barely anything.
All a lie.
Barely anything. So like, I would just say that like, if you're counting on this big pop and this big explosion, nah, it's not happening. There isn't that much discontent. As a general rule, Westerners, in particular British people, are actually a pretty compliant bunch. Lamentably so, perhaps not. And to be clear, I'm not advocating that anyone does anything. I have no political opinions either way. Yeah, so every bit of my bones and blood are in this country. I have, DNA wise, I'm like 2% Danish, and that's about it. 2% Danish and like 1% Irish, and everything else.
I understand about your family, man. Like my family is a long line of cannon fodder. Your family was like a long line of people who used to do good stuff for Britain. But I still think you're wrong. Don't give up on Brits yet, mate.
We'll see. But yeah, I mean, if people are considering alternative options, Italian or Danish. Italian is an easier language to learn in my experience. It's also a nicer language.
Well, the thing I would say about the Italians and the Danes is they both have very cute girls.
Secondary criteria for me at the moment. I just want a place that's sane.
Yeah, the Italians and the Danes both have very cute women. Really, it's a true story. Been to both places, like both of them. Both very cute girls.
Yeah. So yes, that's just sort of the story in Baltimore.
But don't give up on this shit, dude, George. I've seen you gradually doing this, and you shouldn't, because we ain't lost yet. Britain's been in some really bad places. I mean, look at when King Alfred the Great was in charge of Wessex. Look at when William the Bastard took over England, and we've always got out of it. And we still could get out of this.
So when I say get out, like, things get better, like I think it's a part of the way human ecology works. It's that, I hate to be cliche, but there is that thing about hard times create hard men, good hard men create good times.
And we're getting towards that now.
It's not. We're getting towards that. We are at the weak men create hard times bit. We are there. We are there. Like that.
But we are getting towards the hard times make good men.
Yeah, but the thing that I would say is that takes a long time. It's not something in which there's a switch of the button, things kind of suck, and then instantly you get a new Roman Empire. It's going to be a long period, possibly a century, of people in general not being competent, people things just getting worse and worse. There might be famines in the future. I don't know. I mean, you've got to bear in mind the world population just passed 8 billion people, and
Yeah, don't the World Economic Forum hate that?
well, I neither hate. I think people are good things. I
got no opinion on it. I like it's
yeah,
like
but in general, I think that people are lovely. Most people I have met in my life have been good people, and so I have nothing against them. What I would say is that you can't have a population that's growing forever. This world does have finite resources, and not only that, we're getting worse at inventing stuff. The last time that any country actually had a big invention was probably the World Wide Web in the 1990s. There hasn't been a huge big thing since then.
no. Are our jets getting faster or anything getting better? No, they're not.
Yeah, and most technological progress these days is either A, incremental, or B, it's not done by people. It's done by computers. It's done by artificial neural networks.
Yeah, don't disagree.
So, like, the actual capacity for humans to make more change, I'm quite pessimistic about. And I think that, I think we should probably all be willing to accept that things are not going to get much better for a long time.
Hang on. Look, this is where I disagree with you, George.
Yeah.
I reckon the Brits, before anyone else, will say, hang on, this is bollocks. And we have to reverse what's going on. Much of it will be just the nonsense that has gone on in social studies over the last 150 years. But just doing that will change everything.
I disagree, because like you can think that like a large amount of the population aren't completely crazy. And that's probably true. Most people probably aren't completely crazy.
No,
mutants
they're not. No.
But that a large amount of the population don't cook. So 50% of the population don't like cooking, for instance. Edward Dutton actually did a good thing about that.
Is that true? Really?
Yeah. Most people cannot grow their own vegetables.
They can't boil an egg or make a casserole.
Yeah. Most of the population couldn't grow a vegetable if they tried. I'm not saying that. How do I put this? I'm not saying that I don't think people are bad or anything like that, but I do think there is much less resilience in the population, and that is not a recipe for good times.
I know what you're saying is to a large extent true, George. But on the other hand, I always take into account your granny, and your granny is like British history in most respects.
Yeah, so if you want to talk about my granny, so she was a woman grew up in the post-war, very sort of classic tough woman, because she grew up on rationing.
Yeah.
She married
with her husband in the military and all the rest of that stuff.
My grandfather wasn't a military man.
But she was lucky then. They met, they had a good family, and she got 2 degrees in a time when most women didn't get any degrees, and she taught theology at school, at an all girls school, and she's a very 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 admirable woman, possibly my the archetypal my favorite woman ever, in a weird way. But like, it has to be said that like most people will not be living up to that standard. Most people are not. That is a time that those are people of the past, and no.
Well, yeah.
No, I don't agree with you, George. Like I think like most of your granny's generation were the same sort of people. Like they believed in that stuff. Chris is giving us a bit of video occasionally from like him driving to.
Sorry, I accidentally pressed the camera when I was supposed to press the microphone button. So I'm driving to work. I figured I'd get back in while I'm driving.
Yeah, he's going to work, man. He's going to work to give people a new roof. We on the right have got to get more on that line. We've got to go like doing real things for real people. And I loved it when I was watching. Let me explain this. When we were watching the streams on the funeral of Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, I noticed most of the things you said, George, about that stream, and some of the things you said about your granny saying to you, and they were just true. That's really what I'm trying to say.
Most people didn't take off their hats during that
Yeah.
funeral. Which,
Yeah, and they were cheering when the bloody hearse went past. I mean,
yeah,
who the hell does that?
and when people describe their monarch, their first thoughts weren't of loyalty. They're like, "Oh, she's like a grandma."
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, a lot of those customs and those traditional sort of rituals were not at all passed down to this generation. So it's not really their fault. And I just wanted to bring up what you were saying about the resilience. I'd say I'd call it anti-fragility. That's another thing that's sort of disappeared from this generation. And I partially agree with Duke when I say like that's still in there. All that potential is still inside the generation. It's just that they haven't been tested and they haven't been through any significant, calamity or like, catastrophic event, blah, blah, blah. But I think about things like the lower, like when people are always bringing up the testosterone levels and the sperm count and all this sort of stuff. It's not, I mean, some people say that it's some genetic drift that's going on, like we're genetically deteriorating and devolving. I think there's a slight amount of that because there is the selection pressure on certain populations is reduced from medical aid to childbirth and all this sort of stuff. I agree with that, but I think a lot of it has to do with the sort of societal activity that we're doing. I mean, there's lots of evidence that shows that environment in and of itself and interactions and behavior can affect testosterone levels quite significantly. And I think that the problem is that all of these men are just steeped in a feminine demasculinated sort of life and environment. Like they're forced to work with women and adopt their behaviors and adjust their behavior and mannerisms according to the feminine sort of style. Then none of them are taking part in any combat. None of them are taking part in team sports or any sort of physical, like male-only physical sort of activity. All that sort of stuff. Like that has a marked effect on testosterone levels in developing boys.
It's a funny story actually. So I was a part of the Scottish public school system, and most boys within Scottish public schools are expected to play rugby. And I met a guy from another one of the schools. I won't say who was a few years younger than me, and it turned out that their school had dropped the requirement for boys to play rugby. Just gone, and like, I'm not saying that everyone has to enjoy rugby, but I do think that it's very important that boys play something that's aggressive, so to speak. Something that, because the thing that's so wonderful about rugby is it's not malevolent. There is definitely a lot of chivalry in rugby, but there's also the need for the aggression, and there's also the need for camaraderie. Very, very healthy stuff. Just gone. And I also don't mean to be prejudiced against people who play football, but I will be.
Yeah, go for it.
Because
Football is gay, mate. Honestly,
it's just, I mean, it's just playing fairies with your feet, has to be said. But yeah, I mean, there is actually some reasonable evidence that the drop in testosterone is partly genetically mediated. I mean,
Yeah, of course.
The actual quantification of that I can't give you right now, but it's probably in between about 30 and 40% of the overall drop. Because
hey, George and Chris, the only Northern Hemisphere team ever to win the Rugby World Cup was the England team. It's the only Northern Hemisphere team.
That is true, but my people have gotten close a few times.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's great. That's great. And like when I watched that in Early Beach, all right, when England won the Rugby World Cup, and it was glorious and beautiful, and I almost lost my voice because like I was barracking for England so bad. And on the way back, my little mate Josh, who was a Aussie diving instructor, he was about 5'6", got assaulted by about four Brit blokes, English guys, who were burning. They actually didn't get assaulted. They were burning in England. They were burning an Australian flag. And like he turned around and said, "Nah, fucks, don't do that." And like they wanted to beat him up. And I turned around and said, "Well, if you fucking want to beat him up, you're gonna beat me up, because that's an Australian flag. The same Australians who came over in World War One to help the Brits, and then came over in World War Two to help the Brits." And like these cunts didn't even get it because they were soccer supporters. They weren't really rugby supporters at all. Otherwise, they would have got it. You know, like a bit like the Ashes is it's a family game. You know, the best Australian cricketers versus the best English cricketers is an Australian British family game. It can get vicious sometimes, but it's a family game.
But I talking a bit about cricket, I mean, it's kind of tangentially related, but if there are any English people in the chat who haven't been to a test match, I advise you go. And I also I advise you try and find out where the Barmy Army are sitting and sit as close to them as possible. Because I will tell you from personal experience, I was brought there as a young man, about 10 or 11, to go see an English cricket match, and I was next to the Barmy Army. One of the funnest experiences of my life. I can honestly say that. It is a fantastic little bit of joy. Doing that.
The Barmy Army are great. When I lived in South Africa, George, I got hold of the Barmy Army when they were coming to South Africa to play South Africa. And like, I got so many good blokes, and I sat with them for 3 days watching the England-South Africa test in Durban. And they liked me so much, they gave me a free ticket to the 2000 millennial thing in Durban, which I didn't pay for, which was like, I don't know, it was quite expensive. They just got it for me. Barmy Army are good blokes. They really are.
No, it's joy. It's a wonderful bit of joy doing that. And I'm saying that because I mean, I think people would describe me as reasonably black-pilled, and I guess I am. But like, I do think there are still times and places to have joy, and have fun. And if you are living in Britain, you might as well enjoy one of the last good going strong British institutions.
There are many good British and Old Commonwealth things that still go on. You've just got to find them.
No. Yeah. So, just yeah. Is there anything else that I can say about the budget that hasn't been said, or any of this actually?
Well, it's just going to destroy all British business and small business. It's just going to destroy all of it.
Well, yeah. I mean, if anyone wants, actually, if just a quick comparison, you don't have to be totally geeky like I am about this sort of thing. If you want to just look up Ireland's GDP per capita, don't be fooled, and look it up against the UK's. So in Ireland, in 2011, they cut taxes. Ireland is now per person twice as wealthy as the UK is, because they kept that level of tax. Now, I'm not saying that Ireland is perfect, because of certain policies that they've done. There is now an even greater shortage of housing in Ireland than there is in the UK. I wonder why that might be. But there are some good things about Ireland. And one of them is that people can be strivers there. You cannot be a striver here.
You're going to be destroyed. Absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything will go to a bigger, more unreliable and less stable state. This country will slowly become a South American quagmire. So there you go.
Chris is almost.
I gotta go, mate. Sorry, mate. I was at Bunnings and I'm walking around carrying buckets before I go to the job.
That's all right, mate. You're working. It's okay.
He's loading 16 tons for the government.
No, he's loading 16 tons for himself, but like the government will take 14 tons off him. Is more accurate. Lady of Shalott says housing is a huge issue in era. The Irish government's preferences to give houses to Saharans does not help. Yeah, absolutely, Lady of Shalott. You're entirely correct, of course.
Yeah. So, actually, I mean, I don't know. I know some people in Northern Ireland in particular who are, they're not, because they're of my generation, they're actually relatively more indifferent about the Protestant versus Catholicism thing. And they've come to me about this a few times, because there's actually a bit of a toss-up, because in Northern Ireland's housing is about 3 times as cheap. But because Northern Ireland, it's not suspected.
You can get a great house in Northern Ireland.
You can get some fantastic
fraction of the price in the UK. Yes.
Yeah. Northern Ireland is possibly one of the best places, cost of living wise, to live in the UK. I bet the Northern Irish are going to regret me saying that in a bit, because a whole swathe of English people are going to come over and vote for Labour. But
no, they won't vote for Labour, mate.
Yeah, I mean, Ireland is also richer, but also has less housing. And it seems to be it seems to be a genuine toss-up between the two areas. But people should it's not. Northern Ireland isn't a bad idea at the moment. I'm considering moving there myself.
Minona is saying 555. I grew up on a farm. Was hard as fuck. He also says getting up at 4 a.m. to feed and water pigs, pitch manure, and gather eggs before getting ready for school, only to do it again after school, was a lot of work. But that was like most Western people's life for most of the Western world, was it not?
Well, yeah, it was.
Except for the fact that they wouldn't have been sent to an education institution for 8 hours a day. They'd be spending all the time on the farm.
Yeah, absolutely. They would have learned what they learned on the farm.
Which I wholeheartedly endorse, by the way. They should be staying on the farm, being an apprentice to their father, and becoming a real man.
I'm going to take a middle ground about this, because the Malthusian economy, which is what is typically referred to as the period in which most people had to work on farms because there was a shortage of food, was not a terribly nice place to be at, because, you know, if a famine struck, a lot of people are going to die. You know, the average amount, you know, your average living standards then was about $550 a year. $550 per year, to be understood, is the poverty line. It's
but what's that today, George? That would be vastly more dollars.
no.
I think you're saying adjusted for inflation.
That is $550 in today's money. So that is so the amount of food. So the source of food.
$550 a day for the year.
No, not a day, not a day for a year. Sorry, for a year.
I was going to say.
My bad.
Sorry.
That
All
was
right.
yeah, and it was, you know, it was grueling, and like, I mean, I have nothing against people who want to do a bit of hard labor, but even I suppose that most people who do hard labor also want heating and lighting. So, you know, it's I wouldn't glorify the farm too much. You know, some people
without it, there's no civilization, though, is there?
No, but that being said, you need farming to have civilization. I mean, that's the sort of the typical trajectory of human civilization.
George, look, all right, you're a Scot, all right? You would have seen the Highland cow around the place, and the sheep, and the pigs, and all the rest of it.
Mainly sheep, where I'm at, yeah. But
there would have been those lovely Highland cow, which are especially adapted to the Northern Highlands, as sort of. And you would have seen all that stuff, man. So you know it's not a lie.
What do you mean it's not a lie? I mean the fact that civilization, like, everyone needs to eat. It's a reality that, you know,
everyone needs to eat. But like what we did in the West was we got animals, domestic animals in the West, who would be like sorting our stuff and would support our stuff. So you would get things like Highland cows, for example, which are absolutely adapted to Scottish conditions, and things like what's the Scottish equivalent of the Shire horse? I'm trying to remember that. Clydesdales. You would get horses like Clydesdales and all that kind of stuff, and we could do that.
Well, I mean, the point I was trying to, you can get livestock to help out, but normally the average medieval peasant would not have livestock within their means, because the traditional contract would have given you about 2 or 3 strips of a field. And
sorry, mate, you did take me a little bit too literally. I didn't mean specifically being an agriculturalist in medieval times. I mean the concept of being like a son being an apprentice of his dad and not going to school and, you know, learning a trade and actually becoming. I don't literally mean being a peasant in medieval times.
Sure.
But hang on, this is where I get upset sometimes about modern readings of ancient history. Like, even peasants in ancient history got some meat. They got
some. Like,
there's always a high risk of famine if something goes wrong, though.
There was, but they had pigs. They did absolutely have pigs.
So the general trend that you would get when you had these things is that if you had a big famine in a given area, then a lot of people died, and so each person had a lot more land. Like, there was a lot more land per person. And so what would happen was that during those periods, a peasant would breed more livestock to live on that land. And then as the population grew, the ability to have more livestock decreased. So you kill the livestock and replace it with agriculture until all of a sudden there was another famine, and then it repeated itself.
So I don't totally agree with that, George.
But that's what the data is.
It might be, but I still don't totally agree with it. I think that most people had their own pig, and that they were fattening, and some of them had their own goats or their own sheep, and and they had a cow, or they might have had 2 or 3 cows and a bull and then said, okay, well, these 2 cows we're not going to keep over this winter. I still think that happened.
Like, what might happen is that if at times in which the society, not the individual, but the society is particularly wealthy before the Industrial Revolution, when individuals had, only a given strip of land to work with, which was quite small, what might have happened is they might have kept something over. They might have kept some grain over to trade in for a pig at Christmas. That might have happened.
Ellen Hunter says in the chat, and I think that person is right, common land was for animals, and it was. And that was one of the reasons why the people anti the enclosures, which happened in Scotland, but also happened in England, said, no, we need commons because the commons are what keeps the English peasants and the Scottish peasants back in the day. That's what keeps them being viable, because of the commons. And also, not only because you could graze your animals on the common, but because you could also hunt a deer on the common and all this kind of stuff. I don't know what you think about that, George, but that's like...
I mean, I can't give too much comment on the commons because it's actually, because of the way the commons operated, it's actually quite hard to get historical data on them. What I can say, the only thing I can say is that animals that were tied to individual peasant families decreased when the population was high. That's what the data indicates. The point I was actually going to make, moving on from the idea of the sort of the late Roman idea of my father was a baker, I am a baker, you, my son, shall also bake. Is that like, yeah, well, it's a late stage civilizational idea that you get when you transfer into harder periods, and the reason why you do that is because it's a great way of preserving knowledge and skills, you lose that when you get civilizational complexity, because you need people to be more adaptive. But I mean, the society is going to become less complex, because people are simply not going to be as reliable as they were 50 or 100 years ago.
Sounds like what we're heading for.
Yeah, and I'm not saying this as I think it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying that's probably what's going to happen. And so, yeah, you probably are going to see a lot more apprenticing. So, and like, the level of technical decline, I don't know. We might lose computers, we might keep them. We might lose writing, we might keep it. I simply don't know. But what I do know is that there will probably be a shift towards that sort of model of my father was a baker, I bake, you too, my son shall bake, which I believe was actually a line that came around in the 5th century of the Roman Empire, which was right when things were going really belly up. So yeah.
I mean, Japanese working ethic is still based around that foundation.
Yeah. So the Japanese is another interesting.
Shop owners, craft artisanal, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so, yeah. Japan is a very interesting example because Japan is possibly the one or two of the main westernized economies, rich economies that actually still keeps a huge artisan industry. If anyone ever goes to Japan for even a few days, it's actually very interesting to just walk along a high street and see how many artisan shops there are, because there are much more sort of specializations in artisanships.
Yeah, I like Japan. Japan seems like pretty triad in many respects.
Like pros in knife making versus pros in Hina dolls versus pros in X, Y, and Z. There is a lot more artisanship in Japan than, say, still stays in China, which in many ways is a tragic thing because, both, a lot of those Eastern cultures have a lot of.
Richard, sorry, not Richard. Chris, do you have an apprentice?
Not yet, but I will be taking one on. I may drop out momentarily because I'm driving through the hills and there's bad reception.
Yeah,
But
that's
yes,
all right. mate.
that is the plan, and eventually to have some sort of an apprentice. Yeah.
Oh, cool, man. Cool, man. So long as you're teaching somebody else to do what you do, I reckon that's all right.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a daughter on the way. I don't think she's going to be suited to roofing.
No,
But,
she ain't gonna be a roof. She ain't gonna be a roofer, mate.
You're
No,
gonna rip her out of her mother's arms, and you're gonna put a tradie hat on her, and you say, "Right, get to work right now. I got profit on the line."
If we end up having a son in the future, then yeah, he'll be my apprentice.
Yeah, no, a son as a roofer would be kind of cool because, like, it's a reasonably hard job, and yeah, absolutely, I could see that. But you wouldn't want your daughter to be a roofer, for God's sake.
God no. This is no place for a woman.
Exactly, or just standing on top of a roof when it's like 90 degrees and it might piss down the rain for like 50 minutes now, and your hands are constantly going to be cut from steel. Nah, you don't want that. That would be like almost like wanting your daughter to be a soldier, which would be ridiculous for any man.
I can still have a son yet. Trannyism is still a thing.
No, look, Chris, you probably will have a son, and you can teach him to do the same thing, and hopefully, like, he will also have an appy. He'll have an apprentice. That would be great, but like, why would you want your daughter to do that shit? You wouldn't. It's not a girly thing to do,
I'm just wondering, how George, how you were saying, like we may end up returning to some form of like normalizing the apprentice rather than what we have now. Because of this bust that's going on and how they're doing cuts of like HR departments and diversity departments and all these ridiculous, superfluous sort of social engineering sort of groups that sort of parasitize the companies. Because I think the attitude is slowly sort of popularizing the idea that these people are all dead weight, and they are in fact, like the fact that as soon as the bus came, they were all the first ones to get axed. So I'm wondering if that's going to create a sort of a cultural shift away from this managerial feminine style of running a company or in education. Like I'm wondering if it's going to start a wave. I don't know. What do you think?
I would say that if it does, it's going to take a while because there is a lot of sunk cost at the moment. Since the 1980s or so, we have sunk in a lot into educating young people with degrees that are not necessarily practical. And I'm not trying to bludgeon those people. Some people are genuinely intellectually interested. The problem is that even if you do have a lot of people who are intellectually interested, it's very hard to economize that. So, so you've got a lot of people who have degrees in things like business, management, accountancy, and so I've met some really blooming whiz great accountants, but the problem is with accountancy is that that's not generating wealth. The problem with management is that you're not actually creating things that people consume. And we have about 4 decades of training people doing those sort of things. And you can't reskill people very easily who are in their 30s or 40s who have those sort of skills. You can't teach. Good luck teaching a mid-level manager in his early 40s how to code or how to lay bricks. It's not happening. So if that happens, it will take some time. And while that happens, I don't mean to be rude, but a lot of those people will be dead weight. And management, management is the sort of the thing these days, and business conferences in which people talk about things and then don't do anything. I know a guy, for instance, who works in FANG, which is computer science speak for one of the big tech companies, and he said that like 90% of their meetings are just people talking about their concerns about their own well-being, and like no one's producing stuff. Like you get like in these big tech companies, you'll get about like 1 or 2% of people who are blitzing ahead. So Elon Musk, for instance, talked about how when he took over Twitter, like there was just huge amount of people who weren't like software engineers. They were instead like, inclusion.
Yeah, it was upwards of like nearly 5,000 of just these managerial types who literally don't contribute anything to Twitter whatsoever. It's all peripheral sort of marketing and social engineering that they did. It was utterly, and because it wasn't even a profitable company, it's like, well, what's the fucking point of these people?
Yeah, and so like, I guess the point I would have is that we have so many of those people. You can't change the economy instantly, because that like a big part of the economy is those skills at the moment, or quote skills. The point at which we're going to get people who are producing things that are consumable to people as a broader part of the population is a while off. If it happens before things get truly into a pretty bad mood, and like and I'm not saying what that bad mood's going to be economically. It could be that there's going to be a huge sovereign debt crisis, which a lot of the big economists I follow think is going to happen. It could be that there's going to be a population crisis, because there are just too many people, and then the food supply goes wrong. I don't know what it's going to be, but I do know that something's just not quite right at the moment.
Yeah,
and I think
do agree with you. I do agree, and it will take a long time. But I mean, the only way that they're going to no longer be so entrenched is with some sort of sweeping economic crisis, such as the thing that incentivized all those companies to ditch their diversity thing. Like, as long as that keeps on happening, I mean, it is only going to get worse. This inflation and everything is going to get way fucking worse. And I think that will just by necessity just make them all redundant, and they won't have any choice but to learn an actual skill. I mean, it'll be dire consequences and dire straits that will force them, they have no choice but to do something else. So
yeah, it's going to be tough. Yeah, but I guess that's all I can really say about it. Yeah, like there is so much shit. Excuse the language, that's going on at the moment. That because everything seems to be going wrong at the moment. Supply lines aren't going right. It looks like the general central banking orthodoxy for the past 80 years has just gone up in smokes. The human population, the workforce has essentially gone down by 10% since COVID in most Western countries. Everything's going really wrong, and it's happening much quicker than I expected it to. I thought that we were going to start getting difficulties by like the 2040s or 50s. It looks like it's right around the corner, and I don't know what's going to happen next, but it doesn't look fun either way. So,
so someone said in the chat about an hour ago, and I laughed my ass off. But can you please say "curly whirly burglar alarm"?
Curly whirly burglar alarm.
There you go. Someone asked that.
Is that to do with the fact that Scottish people say burglar?
Yeah, well, he was saying, "Haha, George is getting more Scottish by the minute." And then
so this is in reference to the fact that my accent does change depending on which part of the UK I'm in at that point in time, and also yeah, just the sort of people I talk to. No, like I spent the past few years spending a lot of time in England, and so
George, you're one of my best friends as far as I'm concerned, but your accent has definitely got more Scottish, which I don't think is a bad thing at all. But it's definitely got more Scottish over the last 6 months.
you see, I'm a bit of a chameleon. You see, I just my accent just changes depending on where I am.
You used to have a terribly English public school accent. You did, but it was still a little bit Scottish. But you had to know Scottish to realise it was.
Yeah, that's what the sort of people I grew up with. That's the sort of accent they were expected to have. That's what you're raised by your family to have.
Listen, I like Scottish accents. I like Glasgow accents. I like Highland accents. Like I'm a British Union UK dude, so I like all those accents. So, you know.
Yeah. But yes, my accent does change occasionally. So people are just going to have to.
It's got a bit more Scottish, which is fine. I got no problem with that. So,
I was talking to one of my friends from South Australia, and it was the other day. He was just ranting and raving about how much he hated the sort of woke feminist culture that's taken over the company that he works for, because he's an executive in one of these companies. And every time I call him, I only call him maybe every six months or so to talk to him on the phone. And every time I call him, he sounds more and more like a woman, like just talks like a woman, you know, complains in the same sort of way. It's just like you're just absorbing all of the female features over time. I'm saying, don't work with women.
You find out he's angry at you at some point, and then he won't tell you why he's angry at you.
he does actually literally do that.
The Franklin has asked me, are there any accents you don't like? Yes, French. Don't like.
I can actually give you my least favorite accent of all time.
But actually, I don't mind any British accents that you can come up with. I also don't.
I can name you one. I can name you exactly.
Wait. Let me finish.
Okay.
There are no British accents I don't like, and there are no Old Commonwealth accents I don't like. Are there other accents I dislike? Yeah, all right, the French from the start. But apart from that, nah, not really.
What? Not even Birmingham?
No, I don't.
Yeah, so it's in Birmingham, yeah.
No, I don't even mind Birmingham, Mitch. And Mitch, you sometimes have a little bit of that kind of area accent.
Wait, you're from Black Country, aren't you, Mitch?
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, and Mitch's accent is absolutely fine. It's no. Traditional British accent.
The accent that I detest is the accent that's spoken by middle-class white people in London, and it's called it's called
Mockney. Yeah, we have the Australian version of that is the inner city Melbourne accent. Melbourne, I'm from Melbourne.
Yeah.
So it's called Mockney, and basically the story behind it is that you know, the original people who lived in London, Cockneys, a bit like Duke here, had been pushed out by ridiculous prices and all that, and so the newcomers didn't want to stand out too much as posh people, so they started changing their accents to try and sound like Cockney, but it wasn't very Cockney. So you get something like this: "Hello, darling, how are you today?"
Mockney, yeah.
Is that like Ash Sakar or?
Close.
It's hard to describe. Who would be a good example of this? You're gonna have to get back to me on that. When I go to London, there is a particular barber who I go to, who I like, but the barber there does. Jamie Oliver is a fantastic example. Actually.
Yes.
So there is a barber I like who I go to. Right, guys, today we're going to be making some pork chops. We're going to be marinating.
Sounds like a gay cunt, basically.
Oh,
What does sound like a gay cunt? Do marketing.
Yeah.
Much hate speech. There's a lot of hate in that heart.
But the reason I dislike it is because it's so artificial. It doesn't sound like a real person's, like, you know, it doesn't sound like
Because
that.
it isn't. Because it isn't.
It's, you know, it doesn't have any history behind it. It is a sociological construct.
If you look on YouTube, if you want to, if you're interested in accents, you can find a London accent from about the 12th century up until Henry VIII's time. You can find it. It was there. It was a real accent.
Oh yes, there's a linguist who does English from like 1250 to 1950 from London. It's fantastic. I'll actually try and find the video. But
it's a good video, and in like the London accent was a real accent that half of Henry V's troops at Agincourt would have spoken.
It was very good. Yeah, it's a good piece of work actually. I really liked it. I really liked that video. But you get a lot of people who have, like, there are a lot of accents in London now that have like changed. They are modern and constructed, and they're not. There doesn't sound to be any history behind them.
George, you must have heard, as I have, people are claiming to be white nationalists on the right side of history, and they come out with these West Indian accents. It just makes me sick. You can't be.
I don't like those people by bent of my character, because normally they're rude, they're just not very nice, and like they're just unnecessarily.
Men need to return to speaking like Brian Blessed from Blackadder. Hey, Blackadder!
Yeah. To some degree.
By the way, I do need to pop off right now, so I'm gonna hop off.
Well.
It was good. It was good catching up. But
many thanks for joining, George. You're one of my favorite people. You're always welcome on this stream, and thanks for coming on, man. Go on.
All right. Cheerio. Bye.
Yeah, look, the idea that like London accents are some sort of West Indian patois is disgusting to me, basically. Because it ain't true.
Hey, Duke, I've got to go as well, mate. I've got to start this work now.
That's all right, mate. I heard you putting your ladders up. Go on.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Mitch, like you're a Midlands dude, and like people sometimes like off Midlands accents, like in Birmingham and all the rest of it. But most of them are actually pretty traditional British accents, really. Are they not?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of accents, I mean, I'm going off personal experience. I mean, it's like when it comes to Polish, Hungarian, and just in general, Slavic and Hungarian girls probably have the cutest accents, I would say. French, I can't stand because it's just...
Yep, same.
I can't... Yeah. Swedish, it's really... like, if you listen to the Golden One, his accent is pretty much representative of most Swedish people I've come across.
The only thing I get about, like, all of that stuff is, like, it's a bit gay. But, yeah, that's just me.
Yeah,
I could be wrong.
It's too nasal to really... like, if, for example, if I were to have a university teacher or my employer or wherever have an accent like that, I would find it hard to take such a guy seriously.
True
But-
story. True
Yeah.
story.
Then I don't know what other accents. I mean, yeah. Then you got the whole Brighton accent that George described earlier, which again I can't stand.
Oh yeah, Brighton is like kind of Southeast England lying accent, really. I mean, like when I grew up, I had a Cockney accent, and I deliberately lost it because if you had it back then, you were considered to be an ignorant working class person, if that makes any sense. So I deliberately lost it up to a point anyway. But now I look at it and think, well, yeah, but that was the English accent back in the day of Agincourt, for fuck's sake. So if that makes any sense, that's how I look at it now. So I don't know. It was a realistic accent. It's a real accent of the people. And it was in a time when women and children could walk around the vast majority of London in perfect safety because the old-time Londoners and Cockneys did not attack women and children. So was that a worse time than now? I don't think it was, to be honest. Like, yeah, you could go into a pub and get into a fight, but that never involved women and children. It just didn't. It was the way things were, and I'm pretty sure that would have been the same in Birmingham, Mitch. Like traditional Birmingham, I'm talking about. Like, women and children didn't get involved in those fights because they were fights around men.
Yeah, it's like when I was growing up. Let's say I've been in fights before where I've told the guy, okay, I'm having enough with you. Let's go and fight it out. So we would arrange a time and go to a certain field, not far from, let's say, where we went to school, or not far.
Or you'd say take it outside, mate, which I've done, certainly. Like, you're in the pub, the bloke says, let's take it outside. Okay, we take it outside.
Yeah, that's what I can't respect. You take, for example, let's say the New English in and around Birmingham. Like, there's no respect I can have for those people because it's just they don't do fair fights. It's just they'll do 4 at least, gang up on you. Let's say like, you tell them, okay, let's have a fight because I can't because we just ought to resolve it and just get all our anger out. But then what will happen is you go to the time and place, and they'll just have that one guy who you schedule to have a fight with, which gets all these lads around to beat you up, whether they be like Pakistanis or blacks. Or
Yeah. No, George Roy is saying in the chat, the Birmingham accent is pretty bad. Well, look, I don't have a problem with the Birmingham accent because it's an English accent. And you know what? Every single British bloke who's with someone with a Birmingham accent should go outside and make sure the cunt who's trying to fuck him up can't. Because it's just a one-on-one fight. I mean, where did we lose this idea? I don't get it. Because that's my dad's idea. That was my granddad's idea. My great-granddad's idea. Like, if you get in a fight with someone in the pub, it's one-on-one. Just one-on-one. And everyone else, just make sure it's fair. And Biaki is correct. No more slander on Brummy accents. I got no problem with Brummy accents. Brummy accents are mid-English accents. And Mostly good guys. What's the problem here, gents?
Yeah,
John
I mean, I
Best-
can.
John Best says he has a Cumbrian accent, and that's cool because that's like a really Northern English accent. Great, but Brummie accents are British accents. I don't understand why anyone would not like Brummie accents.
I mean, it's all right. Let's say I don't know. Let's say you take like the Peaky Blinders, where you got that deep voice, Killian Murphy, I think his name.
Oh
is.
yeah, I kind of know that show. I haven't watched it much, mate, but I know the show.
Yeah, that like how he voices a Brummie accent. It's not bad when it's voiced like that, but you take a guy like me, for example. I mean, my voice can come across as high compared to other people's voices, and and also because of my accent, I can struggle with. Let's say I'm learning a foreign language. There are some letters like the R, for example, in say German or Russian or whatever, where I can struggle with the R, and because it sometimes comes out as a W.
But
Especially,
Mitch, let's be fair here. All right, let's be fair. You do have a very strong Brummie accent, but you have a Brummie accent that can speak 8 other languages. So you people have got to give you a break, mate. Sorry. And like I said, your actual Brummie accent ain't terrible anyway, because it's absolutely an English. It's an English accent.
yeah, it's. But I don't know.
I mean, I'm a bit jealous of you because you can speak so many other languages, but your accent ain't terrible. It's just a Brummie accent, which is an English accent.
Yeah, it's. I mean, as I said, like I don't know. Let's say, for argument's sake, I were to say a word with an R in it in another language, I don't know, like German or Russian or whatever. Chances are I'll be understood anyway, so it's not a massive problem. But still, like it's one of those things in it where you like to saying more like a native, just so you wouldn't stick out like a sore thumb compared to.
Mitch, if it was you and me and a couple of other blokes and we were surrounded by the enemy, you got an English accent, mate, then I didn't give a fuck. You got an English accent, so I'm gonna stand with you, man. So don't worry about that shit.
Yeah.
You'd probably call me a southern bastard, but I'm not actually.
Yeah.
The Franklin says a bumpkin accent. You know what? Half the English accents were bumpkin accents, the Franklin. And you know what? We beat all of the world and captured a third of it with our bumpkin accents. So there you go. But no, I'd look if Mitch was standing with me, surrounded by enemies, fuck off. Mitch is an Englishman with a good English accent, and I will never surrender that one. So there we go. All right. Anything else to say, Mitch? Did you have anything else you wanted to bring up on a subject or whatever? Or anything?
I mean, it's the one like George, for example, didn't like because he was saying about Italy or Denmark. I mean, for example, I don't know how I'd get on in Hungary because I'm not exactly fluent in Hungarian, but I can speak a few words here and there. But like, I don't know like what people would think of moving to Hungary just because the language is so awkward to learn because it's the logic of it and everything about it is just so weird. I think like that's the only reason people in our sphere wouldn't move to Hungary. Like Polish, it's like Polish is hard enough because it's just the pronunciation of it alone. Not to mention how the letters are just done, like how it's written is just so weird to look at. So, and Polish is in the same overall language family as English, like the Indo-European.
Mitch, I've tried to explain this to people before, but like you speak 8 or so languages, and like for most of us, That is like impossible. All right. So anyone who listens to Mitch, who is a very nice guy, and he's an English bloke with a very good Middle English accent, I would say. Mitch speaks 8 languages. Like I barely speak one, one and a half, and most people don't. So, like, Mitch is a language genius, which most of us are not. So, anyway, sorry, Mitch. I carry on.
Yeah, it's. I mean, as far as like languages go, I mean, what? I mean, you've got what? I don't know. I'm losing my train of thought here, but yeah, in general terms, it's what? I mean, if I were to advise people on what languages to learn for sake of argument, I mean, I'd just say something like Italian, because let's face it, I mean, Italy is probably the sanest countries at the minute in terms of how the people behave.
Nice people, pretty girls. Italy is good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there is a bit of an argument over whether Northern Italians are snobbish because the whole North-South divide and whatnot, but
Come
I
on.
don't know.
Italian girls are pretty, Mitch. They really are. I mean,
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's like if I had to pick a European country that the chicks are cute, Italy would be fairly high on the. It would be fairly high on my like totem pole.
Yeah. Like, I was actually, I was also thinking about Spain, but then I realized, oh, yeah, Spain, while it's not demographically bad compared to Italy in terms of, because the birth rate isn't as bad as it is in Italy, but in Spain, feminism is quite terrible there, from what I've heard.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a bit better in Italy.
Yeah, I mean, one of my guilty habits in my spare time is that I'll look at Quora and I look because it's so overrun by like people that you and I would detest. So I just think, okay, I looked at, for example, which country would Quora prefer? Like all these shitlibs and whatnot, Italy or Spain? They prefer Spain because Spain, for example, their metro stations in Madrid and Barcelona are pretty. When it comes to Pride Month, they're all doused with a rainbow flag. However, when it comes to Italy, you don't get that. You might get some in, let's say, a couple of big cities like Rome or Milan, but you go to southern Italy, especially because southern Italy is kind of known as a Bible Belt in Italy, so that sort of crap just doesn't fly. And Italy.
Mitch, I don't know what you think about this, and I guess it depends how many of the girls you've met from these places. But I would say Japanese girls are generally not very feminist. Like if you can get them to like Western men, which might mean you don't have a beard and all this kind of shit. Japanese girls tend to be pretty traditional. Far less South Korea.
South Korea is just like it's full on satrap of the American Empire from what I've seen.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, that's what I thought. In terms of Europe, I can't tell you a country to go to, mate. I can't. I liked Danish girls, but like that was just me.
Yeah.
Are they better? I don't know, but like I like them. But like I was there with the British Army, so I was a bit biased. But yeah, I like Danish girls. I like Japanese girls. I'm not sure. Back in the day, I think for the Franklin's purpose, that Taiwanese girls were pretty base. Is that true now? I don't know. I mean, back in the day, Lady Charlotte, great friend of the channel and a member of the Discord. Back in the day, Protestant ladies of that part of the world were great. They were. Are they now? I don't know. I'm not sure. But on the other hand, I'm trying to advise people like you, Mitch, who are single men. I don't know. Who do you go for now? Try and find a good girl. That's about all I can say. I don't know, man. What do you think, Mitch?
Like, in terms of, like, I mean, as much as, like, I say, for example, I'll be on Telegram and you'll get people who are just very defeatist and say all is lost in the West. Like, on one hand, I can't really argue against that because I learn languages precisely just to provide some sort of get out clause in case I want to go to a country like Hungary to escape all this. Because in terms of Europe, Italy, Hungary, perhaps Serbia, but I don't know. I don't know much about Serbia. I'd say Italy and Hungary are like the two sanest countries in Europe. I don't know about Finland because Finland's like their second largest party is sort of nationalistic.
There are some very cute Russian girls though on there, Mitch.
I'd say so. But like, how feasible is travel to Russia? Like, you'd have to take a cheap flight via India into Russia these days.
Well, you'd have to go visit at least. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like of course, don't go for Russian diaspora girls because Russian people who go to the West tend to be people who we're not going to like too much, put that way. But like Russian women in Russia generally tend to be very faithful, so long as like you're masculine and you're a guy who stands his own ground and doesn't let himself be bullied about either by his workmates or by the woman he loves or whatever. That's the kind of man we go for.
Fair enough. Jules Roy is saying in the chat, Korean women are better looking than Japanese, but there's a feminist problem in Korea. All right, I would agree with all of that, except Japanese girls are actually much better looking than Korean girls. Sorry. I beg your pardon. Japanese girls are much better looking than Korean girls.
I think the thing about
if you look at the average Japanese woman, she's pretty hot these days compared to like Western women who are enormously fat, etc.
I think with the case of South Korea, they have a lot of plastic surgery there, so I don't know how much of
the South Koreans are known for that.
Yes, especially like with noses and the eyes as well, which I just don't get. I'm a guy who gets called on Telegram. I get called a fucking mongoloid because my eyes can get squinty at times. So I don't know why South Korean women want to get.
Mitch, you're a Birmingham dude, and like anyone who calls you anything else, I'll like just point out to them, man, what liars they are. You're a Birmingham dude. Fuck's sake, man. How can this even happen? It's just insane.
Yeah, then with Japanese women, it's kind of like, I don't know. I only look at like women from Tokyo, and it's either an extreme of like either the very careerist women who don't exactly look like marriage material, or they're the kind of like women who are like too massively invested into anime, and you can clearly tell it in heavy dress. But then I don't know about the rural areas because I can imagine rural areas where women will be more marriageable, for one of them, play that way. Like, because Japanese society, it's not poisoned to the same extent that South Korean society has been. Because you get, like a Japanese woman can be more traditional compared to an American woman and not get penalized for it
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
much. So it's not, like the Japanese don't get penalized for their traditions in the same way that we here in the West do. That's not to say Japan's perfect, but like they're not indulged the same poisons as we have done.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, Mitch. Japanese women can be traditional Japanese women, and the Franklin, who I've happily seen one of the best channels on YouTube. Go and check out Franklin. He's been in the chat on this stream for the whole stream. Thank you to Franklin, by the way. But yeah, Japanese women and women from Taiwan, which the Franklin knows about, I would say are much more traditional women than most women in the West today. But that's just my own opinion. And there we go. Mitch, thank you very much for joining the stream. And I'm gonna, unless you have anything you want to plug, do you want to have anything you want to plug, Mitch?
No, I can't say there's anything to shill off, Mary.
All right, mate. I'm gonna play us out with a tune, which you guys may not expect, but it's pretty good.
pleasure bed, and believe to love returning, Lord, of its spirit again, Lord, of its spirit again.
Don't know where Duke's gone. I'm guessing that's me off then.